My mission, if I choose to accept it, is to rank all of the Mission Impossible movies. This ranking video will self-destruct in 5 seconds. So with the release of Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, there are now a total of 7 movies in the Mission Impossible franchise. So, of course, I got to do a new ranking. I love doing rankings. And let me just start off by saying that I absolutely love a vast majority of these movies. The Mission Impossible franchise is by far and away my favorite action franchise right now. Ahead of John Wick, ahead of Bond, all of that stuff. I love this franchise so much, and it's so crazy to me that these movies are 7 movies deep and still this good, show no signs of slowing down in quality whatsoever. That is incredible, and I absolutely can't wait for the next one. I'm going to spoil all of these movies, including Dead Reckoning Part 1. I think by the time I end up putting this out, most people will probably have seen it that will watch this video, so keep that in mind. I will spoil all 7 of these movies. With that being said, number 7 is clearly going to be Mission Impossible number 2. This is the only movie in the franchise that I don't like. It's just too weird for me. I like some of John Woo's other movies, but I don't think his style worked for the Mission Impossible franchise for this particular movie whatsoever. I thought the movie is paced very poorly. Hardly anything happens for about the first half of it. Then once we get into the second half, which admittedly there is some fun to be had with the action there, some goofy fun. It's a very goofy movie, but the goofiness for the most part doesn't really work for me. It's very over the top, a lot of zoom ins, a lot of slow-mo. The movie would be like half an hour shorter if the slow motion sequences played out in real time. I think that the romance with Tandy Newton is okay. I know some people really like it, some people really don't like it. It's not my favorite of the romances that Ethan Hunt has, which we will get to. And the villains are terrible and over the top, so this is by far and away my least favorite Mission Impossible movie. Coming in at number 6, and keep in mind, guys, that all the rest of these movies I really, really like. So if I have one of them or several of them lower than you would have them, that's not a slight at that movie at all. That's just a testament to how much I like all of the other ones that are ahead of it. So that being said, number 6 is going to be Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. Now, I know a lot of people are really, really high on this. A lot of people have this as their number 1. They really, really love it. I like it a lot, and I've never been quite as high on it as most people seem to be. The things that I do like about it are the action set pieces. I mean, the building sequence with Ethan is still possibly the most exhilarating sequence in the entire franchise. I mean, you hold your breath throughout that entire scene and on the edge of your seat. So well done. I think Brad Bird does a really good job with the directing. I enjoy the team of this movie. The introduction to Jeremy Renner's character, Brandt, I thought was really well done, and he adds a nice dynamic to the team. The other characters, Paula Patton, we get the introduction of... No, sorry, Simon Pegg was in the movie before, but he gets a much larger role in this one. So I enjoy the team dynamics. I thought this one had a good balance of humor and serious. There were some really funny moments in there that were well-timed and really landed.
Your line's not long enough! No shit!
However, I think this one, to me, has by far and away the least memorable plot and villains. Like, I just watched the movie the other day, and I can't really remember what the villains were trying to do and hardly anything about them. I remember Lea Seydoux was one of the villains, and she did a pretty good job, but she was underutilized. And then the guy from John Wick was also one of the villains who just did absolutely nothing for me. I remember hardly anything about what he was trying to do, and then his death was pretty underwhelming. So while there are a lot of aspects that I really enjoy about this movie, and it is a very fun entry in the Mission Impossible franchise, it has, to me, probably the most forgettable plot and villain. So that's what keeps it down at number 6 for me, but it is still really good. Coming in at number 5 is going to be Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. This is actually the first one that I saw in theaters, and this is prior to me watching 2, 3, and 4, so I had only the first one to go off, and there's certainly a lot to like about this movie. I mean, once again, you get some incredible action set pieces with the hanging on the plane earlier in the movie and then jumping in the giant water butthole pool later in the movie. and then getting rescued. I thought the entire underwater scene is incredibly intense, and the fact that I believe Tom Cruise actually held his breath underwater for that long. I mean, I could never do that. That is an incredible feat in and of itself. He trained for that scene. That's how much he cares about his audience and how much dedication he has. He does this to entertain us and continues to one-up himself throughout these movies. The underwater scene was no exception to that. I love the introduction to Ilsa Faust, played by Rebecca Ferguson. And if you want to count her as a love interest for Ethan, which that's kind of debatable, and I'll get into that a little bit more when I talk about another movie, but there's definitely some chemistry there, and it felt like they were teasing they were going to go in the direction of them being romantic partners. She is my favorite. If you're including her in the group of romantic interests for Ethan, she is my favorite. I absolutely love this character and the introduction to her in this movie, to where we're not entirely sure where her allegiances lie and just keep going back and forth on whether or not we can trust her. I really enjoy the team in this movie. We get Jeremy Renner back, of course, Luther and Benji. There's a lot of fun to be had in this one for sure. I think that Solomon Lane is a great villain, although he was maybe a bit underused in this, and I think that the way that they ultimately defeated him was fairly underwhelming. So the final act of this movie, when you compare it to some of the final acts in the other franchise, and when you compare it to some of the sequences earlier in the movie, was a bit underwhelming in how everything got resolved. And also the plot itself, again, kind of like Ghost Protocol, isn't super memorable, but this one definitely had a better villain. So Rogue Nation is a one that I very much enjoy. I just like the top four a little bit better. Coming in at number 4 is going to be Mission Impossible 3. This one seems to be very divisive amongst Mission Impossible fans. A lot of people really love it, have it even higher than I do. Some people have it as high as number 1. Other people have it towards the bottom. Some people even below Mission Impossible 2, which is quite strange to me. I do not understand that one at all. I just watched this for the first time a few days ago in preparation for Dead Reckoning Part 1 and for this ranking video. I thought it was really good, honestly. The standout of the movie by far and away is Philip Seymour Hoffman's villain, and I think he is still the best villain in this entire franchise. I mean, he is very calm, cool, and collected, always feels like he's in charge and that he's one step ahead of the heroes. He was incredible, especially the opening scene, which is definitely the best opening scene in the entire franchise.
What I gave you.
I'm going to count to 10. You're going to tell me where the rabbit's foot is, or she dies.
Just so intense and gives you a really good idea of the type of villain that Hoffman played in this movie. I don't love the way he went out. It was a bit anticlimactic for me, and that was kind of my only real issue with the movie, is that the third act in general, both his death and just the overall sequence, was a bit underwhelming compared to some of the other ones in the movie. Aside from that, I don't really have any complaints. I think that the personal stakes is a nice touch for this movie. Yes, the big world-ending stakes, that's cool, but sometimes it's nice to have these smaller personal stakes that feels like you can kind of latch onto and relate to a little bit more. Like in this one, it's Ethan's wife, and he's trying to save her. I like Michelle Monaghan as his wife. If you're not including Ilsa, she is my favorite love interest of his, and their dynamic is really good. And the movie is incredibly intense from beginning to end. It's one of the more intense ones in the franchise. We'll get to another really intense movie in the franchise, but this is one that I was absolutely enthralled by from start to finish. And of course, you have the stuff with Kerry Russell that was absolutely shocking. One of the more gruesome visuals in the entire franchise. So aside from a fairly underwhelming third act, including the way they took out the villain, who was a great villain, I love this movie, and it is my number 4 Mission Impossible movie. Coming in at number 3 is going to be the original Mission Impossible. I see a lot of people have this really low on their ranking, and it has always had a special place in my heart. I have always had a soft spot for this first movie, and I loved it even more on my most recent rewatch. This feels very small scale and kind of quaint compared to the newer ones that have gone crazy with action. This is barely even an action movie. It's mainly just a spy mystery thriller. That kind of thing is right on my alley. I love spy thrillers, and the idea that Ethan, his whole team gets killed, and he's trying to unravel this mystery of who did this to him, who framed him. I just found that very compelling. Plus, you get the introduction to Luther, who is a mainstay in this franchise. I think that Jon Voight is great as the twist villain, and the scene where it's showing what actually happened with that haunting music, I thought was really well done. On top of that, it has one of the most intense sequences in the entire franchise with when they're breaking into the CIA and he's dropping down to the floor. And I love the scores of these movies. They're really good, but there is no score in this scene. And I think it really works because it really places you in this scene and gets you even more invested and your eyes glued to the screen. I thought that scene was one of the more intense edge of your seat scenes in the entire franchise. So yes, the later movies have passed it up in terms of action by far, but this one will always have a special place in my heart, and it is my number 3. And now we are to the top 2. And this was a very difficult decision for me because I absolutely love both of these movies. To me, these are both peak action movies with great set pieces, great characters, compelling stories. But after much consideration, my number 2 is going to be Mission Impossible Fallout. This movie is exceptional. I mean, it is one of the best action movies of all time. It has a very compelling story. It has really good villains, a twist villain with Walker, who, yes, him being a villain may have been pretty predictable, but he's still a good villain nonetheless. A great foil for Ethan. Bringing back Solomon Lane. I thought that was really good. The first time we get a returning villain, and I thought he was utilized really well in this movie. Looks very different. Like the first time I saw it, I was kind of confused because with the big beard and everything, looks like a completely different guy. Luckily, he still has that same creepy voice, which is the most important thing. But there is great action in this movie. The helicopter sequence, which leads up to the cliff sequence, there's several really good shootout scenes. I love that they really start to dig even deeper into Ethan as a character and his psyche, how he just won't let people die. And is that a fault or is that a virtue? That can be debated. But I mean, the conversation between Luther and Ilsa, where Luther explains that Ethan's a good man and that the reason they're in this mess is because he wouldn't let him die. Really, really good stuff. And I like how they dive further into Ilsa as a character and her relationship with Ethan. I like the introduction to Vanessa Kirby's White Widow. I think she is a very mysterious, sexy character that was a great addition to this franchise. So I love this movie from start to finish. I don't really have anything that bad to say about it. But my number 1, which is Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, just stood out to me a little bit more. I think the story is a little bit better to where you have the AI itself being the villain. That made for some really, really compelling stuff because you never really know whether our heroes are doing what they're actually supposed to be doing, the right thing, or if they're doing what the AI wants them to do. So there are many conversations throughout the movie to where they go back and forth on maybe the AI wants us to do this, but maybe we should do this instead. But maybe the AI knows that we'll think that. So I found that stuff really, really compelling. I thought the human villain in Gabriel was really interesting as well, and he has ties back to Ethan's past that I thought was interesting, and I'm sure we'll get more into that in the next one. And it's not like retconning, it's just adding more information than we didn't know to Ethan's past. And I love the introduction of Haley Atwell's character, Grace. I thought she was great and totally stole the show for me. So gorgeous too. I mean, this movie is filled with beautiful women. Holy shit, you get Vanessa Kirby back. Pom Klementieff is awesome, and her arc in this movie was interesting. You get Vanessa Kirby back, who is great once again. You get Carrie Elwes in a smaller role, who was awesome. I just think that every single actor in this movie absolutely nailed their role. I will address the one thing that a lot of people don't seem to be liking about this one, and that is the treatment of Ilsa Frost and how they basically fridged her and replaced her with Grace. I am kind of mixed on that. Here's what I'll say. So I think that the scene itself was pretty well executed. I thought, especially with the score of this movie was really good, to where she was fighting Gabriel and Ethan was running, trying to save her, and the score just added to the intensity of that scene. I do wish we would have gotten a little bit more mourning her afterwards. So that part I certainly understand. And the other part that I understand is essentially replacing her with Grace. Now, they are definitely not the same character, which I've seen a lot of people say that. They're very different characters. So that is not a fair criticism. But bringing in this new woman to essentially kill off a returning woman character and replace her with a different one, I understand that complaint 100%, even though I thought that it was fairly well executed, and the idea of having to kill one of them so that Ethan can try to get revenge on Gabriel, which is what the AI wants, I thought that was pretty interesting stuff. So it didn't bother me quite as much as it did a lot of people, but I completely understand the complaints, and she might not even be dead. We'll see. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. The action in this movie is really, really good. Again, I mean, especially the train sequence at the end, and it's paced incredibly well. It's a 2-hour and 40-minute movie, but it absolutely flies by. So this is one that I had such a good time with from start to finish. It is one of the funnier Mission Impossible movies. I thought that it found that balance really well between funny and serious. So it's compelling, it's intense, it's well-paced, it's got great action, great characters, including new and old, and it ends in a way that it is definitely a part one, and there's definitely more to come, but it's not like a frustrating, hard cliffhanger like some other movies that came out this year. So I adore this movie. I adore this franchise, and Dead Reckoning Part 1 comes in at number 1. So there you have it, guys. How would you rank all 7 of the Mission Impossible movies? There is really no wrong way to rank these movies, except for, in my opinion, having the second one last. I don't like that one at all, and I don't really understand how... I don't know. I don't get how people could have that one above any other movie in this franchise, but that's just me. People have different tastes. Maybe the weird, goofy John Woo style works for some people. I've seen a few people that do like it and defend it, but it has never worked for me. Aside from that, all these other movies are really, really good and have their own strengths, and some of them have weaknesses that put them a little bit lower, but this is by far and away my favorite action franchise, and I hope they keep making them because I am so invested in these characters, and they keep finding ways to outdo themselves with the action. I forgot to talk about the motorcycle stunt, we saw that all the time in the trailers. They were really hammering it home that we were going to see this scene in the movie, and I thought it was really well done, and it works even better within the context of the movie. And once you understand why they're doing it and what exactly they're doing, it's probably not exactly what you had originally thought based on the trailer. At least it wasn't for me. So I thought that was really well done, and I absolutely cannot wait for Dead Reckoning Part 2. Hopefully, I don't know if it's going to come out on time with a writer's strike and actor's strike, but hopefully fairly soon, because I just absolutely love this franchise, and I hope as long as Tom Cruise is still alive and still in good shape and still willing to do all this crazy stuff to entertain us, that they will continue to make these movies and they will continue to be good. I can't see any reason why they won't be. So again, how'd you guys rank the Mission Impossible movies? Drop a comment below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Likes are so important for pushing my videos out to more people, helping me grow my channel. If you enjoy my content in general, subscribe, hit the notification bell, get notified when I post a video. Stay tuned. I got more stuff coming. I will see you soon.